Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into the history of Brownstown, Michigan.
Really fascinating period, especially around the War of 1812.
Our listeners are clearly interested in that era, so we've got maps, historical markers, local records, the works. Ready to uncover what life was like back then.
Absolutely. What makes this area so interesting is how much was at stake. It wasn't just a local conflict. This was about control of a whole region. And Native American tribes were right in the thick of it.
Yeah, you can't talk about this era without understanding the impact on Native American communities. So, okay, picture this. It's the early 1800s. Thick forests everywhere you look.
I can imagine.
The Detroit River is like this major artery, a lifeline for transportation and trade.
Right, like a main highway.
Exactly. And connecting it all, you've got this rough, muddy, what they called Holes Trace, this crude road. Not exactly a walk in the park.
Not at all. And it's into this setting, with all the tension of a looming war, that we encounter a figure who really embodies this clash of cultures, Adam Brown.
Adam Brown. Now, there's a name that jumps out from the history books. His story is incredible.
It really is.
Okay, so our sources tell us he was captured by a raiding party of, get this, Lenape warriors. He was only 8 years old. Can you imagine?
8 years old. That's
1764. This young boy from Virginia taken captive along with his brother and another boy during a raid.
wow.
And while his brother and the other captive were eventually released or escaped, Adam remained a captive.
Oh, wow.
And he was adopted into the Wyandot tribe. He even took on the name Tohonaha White.
Talk about a life-altering experience.
Totally. But here's the thing. He doesn't just survive. He thrives. He becomes a respected leader within the Wyandot, a prominent member of the Deer Clan.
It really makes you think about resilience, doesn't it? Like, how do individuals navigate such massive upheaval and not just survive, but become leaders?
Absolutely. And as if his early life wasn't eventful enough, the War of 1812 erupts, and Adam Brown, now a leader within the Wyandot Nation, is caught in the middle of this maelstrom.
Right, and by this point, Brownstown was a key location.
Oh yeah, let's talk about this war, because things are about to get very real very fast.
They sure are.
We have the Battle of Brownstown, which takes place right in the heart of this area on August 5th, 1812. And the historical marker there does not hold back on the details.
It's a gripping account, paints a very vivid picture.
It does. So imagine this. You've got about 200 American soldiers under the command of Major Thomas Van Horn. They're marching south along that rough corduroy road, the one we were talking about.
Right, trying to get to the River Raisin. Crucial supply route.
Exactly. Their mission was to secure supplies for American forces in Detroit, which was under threat from the British.
High stakes.
Incredibly high. So they're marching, they need to get these supplies through, but it sounds like they're walking into a trap.
Well, the British, allied with Shawnee Chief Tecumseh and his warriors, were waiting. They'd taken a strategic position near Brownstown Creek, ready to ambush the Americans.
Attempts to say, now there's a name to conjure with. This guy was legendary.
Oh, absolutely. A brilliant military mind, a charismatic leader. His very presence at Brownstown speaks volumes about how important this battle was.
Okay, so the Americans, probably exhausted from that road, maybe thinking they're in the clear, they reach Brownstown Creek, and that's when everything goes haywire.
Exactly. Tecumseh and his warriors, they launched this surprise attack. Complete chaos, gunfire, soldiers scrambling for cover.
I can just imagine a chaotic scene. And Major Van Horn, realizing how bad the situation was, he orders a retreat.
He did. But retreats in the middle of a battle, they rarely go smoothly.
Understatement. So how did it go for the Americans?
About as well as you'd expect. It quickly devolved into this desperate scramble back to Fort Lernout in Detroit.
And the casualties?
The historical marker, it lists 17 Americans killed, 12 wounded. Plus 2 were captured and tragically later killed.
And the Wyandot?
Fighting alongside Tecumseh's forces. They only lost 1 warrior. A decisive victory for the British and their Native American allies.
Those numbers, they really bring home the human cost of this conflict. But beyond the immediate impact, how did this battle affect the bigger picture of the war?
It was a huge blow to American morale. Exposed how vulnerable their supply lines were. Remember how important that corduroy road was?
Right, like we were saying, whoever controlled that muddy path, they controlled everything.
Exactly. And the Battle of Brownstown just proved how effectively the British and their allies could disrupt those plans.
So it wasn't just a battle, it was a statement.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And this was just one of many engagements in this area. The battles of Magwaga and the Thames both fought nearby, added to the turmoil of the time.
And through it all, you've got Adam Brown and the Wyandotte trying to navigate this impossible situation.
Caught between a rock and a hard place, they had to make a choice, and the consequences would be significant.
It's one thing to talk about strategy in battles, but for the Wyandotte, this wasn't some kind of game. This was about survival. What were their options, really, at this point?
They were caught in a really tough spot. Imagine trying to choose between bad and worse.
Right, because if they side with the Americans, they risk losing their land, their homes, their entire way of life.
Exactly. And siding with the British, well, there were no guarantees there either.
No kidding. So they made the choice to fight alongside the British. And Adam Brown, he was a big influence in that decision, right?
He was. The historical record is clear on that. Brown, as a Wyandotte leader, he pushed for that alliance with the British. It was a gamble, for sure. A gamble for their very existence.
And did the British protect them? Like, did that gamble pay off?
Well, that's the thing about history, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's rarely that neat and tidy. The British, they had their own interests to look after, and those interests didn't always align with the Wyandottes.
So it was a risk that didn't pan out the way they hoped.
You could say that. The war dragged on, and for the Wyandotte, things took a turn for the worse.
I bet. What happened?
1813, the Battle of the Thames. Tecumseh is killed. That's a turning point. He was such a powerful figure, a brilliant strategist. His death, it really shook the Native American resistance to its core.
And the Wyandotte, they put their lot in with Tecumseh and the British. They must have been reeling.
Absolutely. Their most powerful ally, gone.
Mm-hmm.
The British, they were losing ground. The Wyandotte were in a very precarious position.
So what did they do after the war ended? Did they stay in the area? What happened to Adam Brown?
Well, after the Treaty of Ghent was signed in 1814, they had a choice to make, a difficult one.
Stay or go.
Exactly. And in the end, Adam Brown, along with a significant portion of the Wyandotte, decided to leave their ancestral lands.
Wow. I can't imagine leaving the only home I'd ever known. Where did they go?
They headed north, across the river, settled in what's now Canada, near Amherstburg, Ontario.
It's incredible to think about. Forced from their land, not just once, but twice. First by conflict, then by circumstance.
It's a stark reminder that history, it's not just dates and battles and treaties. It's about real people, real lives, uprooted and forever changed.
And Adam Brown.
He lived out his days in Canada, died in 1823 in Enderton Township, Ontario.
A life marked by both incredible hardship and incredible resilience. But his name, it lives on. Brownstown, Michigan. It's a legacy that endures.
It does, a testament to his impact on the region. And that brings us to the next chapter in this story, doesn't it? How did Brownstown, this place so shaped by conflict, how did it transform into the township we know today?
From war zone to a bustling community. I'm ready to dig into that. What were those early days like? Who were the people who decided to put down roots in Brownstown? I'm thinking about all those early settlers who came to Brownstown, after the war. Were they given land grants? How did that work?
That's a great question. And the sources we have don't really get into those nitty-gritty details about land distribution.
It makes you wonder, though, right? What was it like for those settlers coming into this area that had so recently been a battleground, a place where treaties had been made and broken?
Absolutely. And what about the Wyandotte who remained in the area? What was their relationship like with these new settlers?
Yeah. After all that conflict, was it tense? Or were there efforts to rebuild and coexist? So many questions.
It's like we've uncovered this really intriguing puzzle, but we're still missing a few pieces.
And that's part of what makes history so fascinating, right? The constant search for answers, the realization that there's always more to learn.
You got it. It's a journey of discovery. And like any good journey, it's not just about the destination. It's about the questions we ask along the way.
I like that. So for our listeners who are feeling that itch to explore, that urge to dig deeper into Brownstown's past, where would you steer them? What are some good starting points?
Well, we've talked about those historical markers. Those are fantastic. Actually, going to the places where history happened, standing on that ground.
Oh, yeah. It's one thing to read about a battle in a book, but it's a whole different experience to actually stand on that battlefield and imagine it.
Exactly. It brings history to life. And don't underestimate the power of local resources. Libraries, historical societies, they can be gold mines of information.
Yeah.
Old maps, diaries, letters. You never know what you might find tucked away in their collections.
You might stumble upon some long-lost diary that completely changes our understanding of Adam Brown's life.
You never know. And that's part of the thrill, right? You're like a detective, piecing together clues, following leads, and sometimes you uncover something truly remarkable.
That's what gets me excited about history. The thrill of the chase, the possibility of discovering something new. And everyone has access to some piece of history, right?
Absolutely. Every town, every community has its own story to tell. And those stories, they matter. They help us understand who we are, where we came from, and how we fit into the larger narrative.
I love that. So for everyone listening, consider this a call to action. Go out there and explore. Dive into the history of your own community. Who knows? You might be surprised by what you find. Maybe there's an Adam Brown hiding in your town's past, just waiting to be rediscovered. Well, that's all the time we have for our deep dive into Brownstown, Michigan. We hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have.
It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating period with you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep the love of history alive.